Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chat with Traders Community. And today we have a presentation by a full-time trader for the last 13 years. His name is Mark Bennell. He spent some time as a general manager of a civil engineering company and traded part-time. And he's gone through a lot of formal education, receiving certificates, CFTe, DipTA, dip sharing trading, of which I don't actually know what these all stand for, but I'm eager to hear Mark share with us what was involved in getting these certificates and what he learned from them. He's presented for the Australian Technical Analysis Association on numerous occasions, including the national conference, alongside market wizards and international speakers. And he's presented for other trading groups as well and conducted in-person and online workshops. Mark, welcome to Chat with Traders Community.
Thank you, Ian, and it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you to Chat with Traders Community for allowing me to share my journey. So, as always with these sort of presentations, especially the one with that outlines my journey, it's my hope that if people can take away one nugget and that helps them in their journey, then I consider that it's been worthwhile.
Great, and we will have periodic pauses. Mark will open the floor up for discussion and questions periodically. So if you'd like to write your question down in the chat window or ask it during the pauses, that would be great. We'd love to hear your questions. Go ahead, Mark, and tell us about your trading journey.
Terrific, thank you. Now I'm just going to share my screen with everybody. I hope that people can see my comment there from George Soros.
Yes.
I might just, we can see that?
I can see it.
All right, very good. So as Ian introduced before, this is a presentation on my foray into trading for a living. So good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. As Ian said, my name is Mark Bennell. I'm a private trader and a qualified technical analyst. Been trading for over 16 years, with the last 13 of those being full-time, and yes, previous occupation, general manager of a civil engineering company. Also worked as a project manager and a project manager, designer, and a sales engineer. So just briefly, some of my qualifications, so you know where I've come from. I have the certification of a Certified Financial Technician, or CFTe, from the International Federation of Technical Analysts. Also have a Diploma of Technical Analysis, Diploma of Share Trading and Investment. I've done a lot of day trading courses. One was Darryl Morley here in Australia, and several well-known US companies. I've done Elliott Wave trading with Elliott Wave International. I'm currently sitting there, Elliott Wave certification, the Certified Elliott Wave Analyst. And of course, I've done numerous short courses, books, and self-directed study, including trading strategies, technical analysis, and trading psychology, and I will dig into some of this in a little while. So let's begin. So how did I get my start into trading? So I successfully traded part-time while I was working full-time. Now this was, I must point out here, this was during nicely trending markets, and I made great returns with early technical analysis and Elliott Wave knowledge. So I didn't just jump in straight off. I actually did a course in Elliott, and just a basic course in Elliott Wave, and bought the platform for that, bought the program for that, and then I began my journey. Now, it's my hope that with this presentation also that some of the frustrations, the struggles, and the lessons that I endured, and also obviously overcame these, and by sharing these can possibly help you to avoid some of these lessons. Because when you hear it, there's an old saying, forearmed is forewarned, or forewarned is forearmed. So I'm hoping that during this presentation that will assist you in some way to avoid some of those, and hopefully shortcut the learning process for you as well. I'm going to also share a little bit of my style at the end, but also point out some of my strengths and weaknesses, how I've been able to work with these. So I'm going to try and keep the presentation relatively concise. It's about 35 minutes, not including the pauses in between. So at this point in time, while I was trading, I thought, and I point out here that it was nicely trending markets. So I traded, I'm here in Australia, Melbourne, Australia. I traded in our resource bull market. So of course, you could basically throw a handful of darts and you could make money. So what this led me to believe was that this is too easy. And of course, you know, why isn't everybody doing this? So I did enjoy my job as a general manager. It was a lot of stress. It was a lot of work. I did enjoy that. I worked my way up, but I always wanted to sort of find something different. And trading for 3 years, I traded part-time. I made good returns on that. My last year, I made about 60% return, which was terrific. So I thought to myself that, look, it's time for change. You know, I'm going to give trading a go. So I decided to basically leave. Now, at this point in time, also, I'm going to mention that to have early success in trading can often be detrimental and can set us up for a fall. So I like this picture here of this soccer player running around with the t-shirt over his head. So sooner or later, there's going to be obstacles and he's going to bump into it. So that was pretty much me in that first, or certainly in the third year. I thought that this was too easy. So I left my full-time employment to trade. So my wife at the time and I left our full-time jobs for a break, and so that I could focus on trading. Now I had the foresight to give myself a time and a financial buffer around about 12 to 18 months to gain a bit of momentum. So my thinking at this point in time was that if I just increased my trading capital, you know, based on my previous returns, if I increase my trading capital and use that to extrapolate that against my previous job income, then I should be okay. So that was my thinking. But so this was me going into full-time trading for a living. I had done the 3 years. I had done some little bit of back testing. So then a short time later, the global financial crisis occurred. Now, at this point in time, I didn't have the experience and the psychological training to deal with this and any tactics to deal with this. So I took some hits, both financially and psychologically. Now, I see this also as a bit of a positive, because looking back, to go through this type of event early in my career was probably better than later, once I'd ramped up the capital and the risk that I was trading was significantly and wasn't prepared. So I see that as a bit of a blessing in disguise. So down the track, the result could have been a lot worse. So that was an enormous shock. But I picked myself up. During that time too, I realized what I didn't know about trading. And certainly that was mostly psychological. So what did I do then? So at this point in time, I thought that I either needed to take trading seriously or prepare to go back into full-time employment. I didn't want to think about plan B, which was going back. I saw that sort of collar and tie as a bit of a noose. So it was really, for me, it was a case of sink and swim for that time buffer that I'd given. So I decided I'm going to take it as serious as I could. So I basically immersed myself into trading. I studied most days as well as traded. I still study now because I enjoy studying. I enjoy bettering myself, but it's more now I'm being better at what works for me. So getting better every day works for me. So I read and studied everything I could find, but what this did was it just led to, well, I could take that sum out and led to a lot of confusion. Now, some would see this as the shotgun approach where you're studying everything. There's no concise study path or roadmap. So this was just really frustrating. No roadmap, no path. as there is with, say, a medical or an engineering degree. So let's use the analogy here where, could you imagine studying everything about medicine or engineering, but only studying small parts of each specialty, and you're never able to grasp the whole concept. So I try and explain trading as a 3 to 4 year degree, and the same as any sort of degree, you have those progression steps. So I completed numerous short courses and self-directed studies. This was in the early days. So look, a lot of these were helpful, some not so helpful, but what I chose to do with all of this was to take away what I could from these courses. And as usual, and I'm sure a lot of you have sat through it, we get 10% meat, 10% worthwhile information, and often, 80, 90% sales pitch. But I always tried to take away something that I could implement from it. The trouble in the early stages is that we just don't know what we don't know. That's the hard part. So add to this, I had no regular income coming in. So you can imagine the enormous pressure that I put myself under. I did give myself that financial buffer, but this is not the way to start trading full time. Now I know that now, of course. So what I did then was I realized that this self-directed studies wasn't the way to go. It was too disjointed. So then I sought out the most comprehensive education that I could find. So I thought, I'll go down the formal trading route. I will find the best education that I could. So I crammed in about 2.5 years of intense formal trading education. And some of those, they were lengthy case studies, and some of the exams were reasonably sort of brutal, I suppose, 3-hour exams. Now, I hadn't studied for probably 25 years and sat exams. So yes, didn't find it difficult, but it was certainly a shock to the system. Now, at this point in time, it's important for me to point out that I felt the more that I studied, the more knowledge that I gained, the better my edge would be. And yes, that is true to a degree, but in fact, what I was on was a knowledge quest. And to steal Alan Hull's saying, it was I'd actually gotten myself into the information prison, where the thinking was, the more that I study, the more it'll help my trading, the more I'll try and create certainty where there isn't any. So that was the route, and that was my thinking behind that. So I had success by working diligent in my previous jobs, previous roles. So I thought the same would apply here. The more I know, the more I'll be able to master this trading thing. But little did I know that really it was just it was that need within me to know. So, and I thought that previous success I had would naturally transfer into trading. So, of course, like a lot of us, I tried all sorts of indicators, trying to find that ideal entry strategy. Now, don't get me wrong here. There's nothing wrong with indicators. They are a form of price or volume. They're a reflection of price or volume. There's nothing wrong with that. But once again, I was relying on them to try and take out the uncertainty rather than confirming the price action I was seeing. I was relying a little bit too much on those. In the early stages too, I didn't seek out the services of a mentor to guide me during these times. Not that I didn't know the importance, just that I didn't find anyone that I felt comfortable with. Now, having a competent mentor at this point in time would have certainly shortened the learning process for me considerably. I'm going to attach a little bit of a caveat here as well, that it's important to state here that you don't need to go through all the studies that I went through to be able to trade successfully. You do, however, need solid foundational trading knowledge and some mentoring, if that's the way that you choose, to guide you through the many pitfalls and assist you in finding your style and identifying your edges. Now, has all the education that I've done, the formal education that I've done, helped me? I get asked this question a lot. Yes, absolutely, it has. Certainly, a lot of the bigger picture work that I do, it has helped me, and even drilling down right down into the scalping style, it has. But you don't need it. It's more important to develop your chart reading skills accordingly. So what I also find too is many aspiring traders simply do not make it because they can't survive the learning process or the learning curve. So what occurred then is I finally figured out what resonated and worked for me after after a lot of trial and error. Back and forward testing strategies. I didn't understand the importance of back testing. I did it to prove it up, but I didn't realize the importance of it. So a lot of my testing then was forward testing, which, as you can imagine, would take 6 to 12 months easy to get your statistics. Add to that trading with real money, trading with decent size. It just brought in all of these other psychological factors as well. So that was difficult. But after trialing, a little bit of style drift backwards and forwards with strategy, certain setups, time frames and techniques, things then became clearer for me, and I figured out what's resonating and, more importantly, what's worked for me. So that applies to analysis techniques. It applies to the setups as well. I teach some setups, and with people it doesn't resonate, and my advice is don't force it. If it's not resonating naturally with you, don't worry about it. Move on to something else. So a lot of my setups, though, they differ from textbook. I guess we see a textbook variation of maybe some sort of pullback. Well, I've created my own variations of those because classic technical analysis is very textbook. It's the ideal scenario, but there's so many variations of it. It's important to create and important to look at those variations. So what I did then was I created extensive trading plans, checklists, playbooks, and journals. I'm very big on treating trading as a business, creating checklists to save myself from myself, playbooks, journals, putting structure around my processes, operating a business-like manner, create a lot of list of goals, really put effort into improving myself day by day. Now, unfortunately, during my knowledge quest in the search for the Holy Grail, I'd subscribed to numerous Twitter feeds, newsletters, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. And I spent an incredible amount of time each day just trying to keep up with emails and things. And I found that was very time consuming, put me under a lot of pressure. Once again, I failed to realize that the secret of my success would only be found when I actually focused on myself and the things that worked. So once I came to this realization, I gradually unsubscribed from all of these other external feeds, I guess you could call it, and really concentrated on reducing the noise. The end result of reducing that noise and just focusing on what I could see was so freeing. It was actually almost liberating, and I'm sure a lot of you can sympathize with that. And I actually felt like I'd actually gained some of my life back, because it was, trying to learn everything, trying to keep up to date every day was extremely time consuming. So I reduced those distractions and allowed me to focus on the things that I wanted to focus on. So then, of course, once I had dealt with that side of it, I then began to be aware of my personality strengths and weaknesses. So at this point, I might just pause here and just open it up for any questions, because this will be a start of a little bit of psychology, my work with psychology. So Ian, do you have any questions at this point in time?
Yeah. So when we talk about, or you've mentioned in the past, knowing and working with strengths and weaknesses, How long into your educational and trading journey did you realize this, how important this is? And how do traders discover this as quickly as possible?
Great question. So I think the moment you go live trading, even if that's small amount, now with demo trade, there's nothing wrong with demo trading. It's an important part of proving up your strategy, but it's not enough. There's not that psychology. There's not that psychological effect going on. There's a little bit of it if you do it properly, but there isn't that. We're not getting those psychological responses that we want and those psychological triggers. So when I was trading and when I started trading full time, I was trading with reasonable size. The size that I was previously trading with, we were coming out of that GFC and starting the journey back up the other side, the right-hand side. But now there's all of these other triggers and there's all of these other emotions coming in, aside from the fact that there was pressure on to trade for a living. I've given myself that buffer, but now, I mean, when I had my job income, so I knew that that was covering everything, covering all of my costs. But now that there was no income coming in, I was well aware of that I needed to get that up to speed relatively quickly. So that's the point when I noticed all of these. So I noticed these psychological effects that I'd previously seen and experienced, but I noticed that they were really haunting me and really stalking me. So that was the point where I realized, okay, these are the triggers. This is what I'm seeing. And what it led me to do was really to look into my personality and say, for starters, this is my personality. These are the strengths, and I'll get into this also as part of the presentation. But I was aware that, okay, these are my strengths. How can they help me? But how can they also lead to weaknesses? And then also, what are my weaknesses, and how will they, how will they be exacerbated during this process? So now, what was the second part of that question, Ian?
Oh, well, the second part was basically, how do traders discover this as quickly as possible? Is it just, it sounds like it's just experience, getting the feel of what it's like to make trades and having money on the line?
Okay, so all of it starts at is with mindfulness. Mm-hmm. So when we're trading, and it starts the moment we wake up in the morning, whereby we need to scan our bodies. How am I feeling? How am I feeling from yesterday's trading process? Taking our psychological temperature and thinking, am I in the right frame of mind to trade today? These are some of the things that I teach, is scanning your body to see, yes, everything's okay. I've taken the loss, I've reset, and I'm okay to trade. So it starts very first thing in the morning. So it's part of being mindful, or if you could imagine somebody else that's reading our thoughts and listening to that dialogue going on inside our mind. Now, if we're feeling that there's something that we can't quite move on from, something that we can't address, and it's still affecting us, it might be that we took a big hit. We might have taken a 3-hour loss, the previous day over the session, and we find that that's still tripping us up. We find that it's still there. It's fine. It's still agitating us or annoying us. It's important to then say, no, I'm probably not in the right frame of mind. So it starts right there. But also too, when you start your session and you start to be trade and you're going through the trading, it's important to be mindful of those thoughts going through your mind, because those are the thoughts that will then translate into action. So being mindful, thinking about what we're thinking about, and also to questioning that first thought. Is that right? Because it's difficult to trade objectively when we have all these emotions going on that are potentially going to sabotage our trading. So as you'll hear later on, it's important to try and protect ourselves from ourselves. So that mindfulness, for starters, is the best way, but also one of the biggest parts, and I'll get into this down the track as well, is basically journaling our thoughts, documenting our thoughts, because what it forces us to do is then to truthfully get our thoughts down on paper. Now that's at every stage during the trading process. So, and look, any trader will find that as soon as we're starting to trade, there's going to be triggers that that will start to invade. And one of those, we've just taken a loss. What's that first thought? It's often revenge. So we've got to catch that as it happens. We've got to be aware of that, catch it, and then we've got to create strategies to collapse that thought. All right, so I won't go too deep into that, otherwise it will take up a lot of our time. So yeah, mindfulness, being aware, capturing that first thought, and then applying strategies to collapse that.
Great. We have a question from Jens in the audience. At what stage did you know that you wanted to switch from part-time to full-time trading? What was the trigger for you to make the change?
Yes, great question, Jens. So at what stage did I know that I wanted to switch from part-time to full-time? So part-time, I was starting to earn reasonable money. I loved my job. I got rewarded well, but it was just a lot of work. And look, when you get to your early 40s, there's a point in time where you feel you've sort of achieved a lot. When you put yourself under a reasonable amount of stress, now this mightn't apply to younger folk, of course, but you do hear of, of people in their early 40s, I'm giving away my age, people in their early 40s having strokes and heart attacks from pressure. So I didn't want to go through that. I'd had that side of my professional life under control, and I just wanted a bit of a change. And my wife at the time was the same. We wanted a bit of a change, wanted to take a bit of a break and just reinvent ourselves. And I wanted to give trading a try to see whether I could do it, Jens. Excuse me. So that was probably the trigger. Sort of had enough, a lot of stress there, enjoyed it, but yes, found it was a lot of stress. So that was kind of the trigger. Now, so that was probably the trigger. Decided I needed that change, Jens, and just kind of needed that break. And there's another one. So I hope that answers that question for you, Jens. But also too, I got what I thought was my statistics, Jens, up to the point where I thought I could just transfer that into full-time trading. And little did I realise that, as I said before, that was in a resource bull market here in Australia. I did take losses, and looking back at all of my results, they were all contained, but I hadn't experienced a drawdown period, so that was the trouble. So I'd got my statistics up enough that I thought I'll just put a factor on that where 3-4 times the amount of capital I should be able to bring in the equivalent of my full-time income. But what I didn't realise was it needs to be a gradual process. So I hope that answers, Jan. Edwards also asked a question here that, great, thanks, Jens. So do you believe that switching from part to full was what actually elevated you to the level that you are now? Yes, absolutely. So it put me under that pressure, Edward, put me under that pressure to succeed, to either succeed or go back into the workforce. So it did. It was a make or break. I think a sink or swim. So could you have accomplished? So reading on from the question, continuing on, could you have accomplished this level of success had you stayed part-time or needed that pressure to get where you are now? Yes. The old saying, Edward, isn't it, that when you're under pressure, you either make it out or you don't. So yes, it was probably that as well. Now, in saying that, the journey to consistency was probably 2 to 3 times longer than it should have been because I didn't have that roadmap. I didn't have a mentor. So that put me under pressure. Absolutely. So I used up all of my time buffer and I used up all of my financial buffer. Add that as well. My wife at the time had some personal issues in the family with some deaths. So that affected her. So she didn't go back to full-time work as well for probably 3 years. So we lived off our savings for that time. So that put incredible pressure on me, Edward, to to make it, which was just, you just cannot have that when you're trying to trade. It needs to be in terms of income. Here's your job income. Here's your part-time trading income. You need to just gradually reduce this, keep increasing your part-time and start paying bills out of this. So you're getting used to that. And if you can go to part-time and then increase, so there has to be that gradual, whereas I did kind of this and expected this to come up to here. It was too fast. So there we go. Very good. All right. Terrific, Edward. Thank you. All right. All right, we might move on there, I think, Ian, if you. All right, so at this point in time, great questions, by the way. So at this point in time, I began to be aware of the effect of my personality, and in particular, my personality strengths and weaknesses on my learning and my trading. So at this point in time, we've dealt with the process side of it. We've dealt with the learning. We've dealt with the education. Now I'm aware of my psychology. So it was during these times of learning and applying my knowledge, I began to really learn about my psychological makeup with regards to trading and decision making. Now, I experienced the many emotions that presented themselves. We all know these if you've traded for a while. What I did was I worked to create methods to work with my emotions, as we spoke about before, during and after trading. Because as most of you may realize, or if you don't, trading in terms of strategy and process, we're 20 to 30% towards your success. Yes, that is incredibly important to develop edge there, but then 70 to 80% of your success will come from your ability to control your psychology. So 70 to 80% of your psychology, in other words, majority of your success will come from your ability to control your psychology. So in the beginning, also, as we explained before, I chased too many rabbits and I didn't specialize enough. I hadn't specialized on one particular strategy, or I hadn't developed my setups enough. So chasing those too many rabbits, as I called, really just put me under enormous pressure. Add that to the pressure to succeed. So when one thing I thought wasn't working as I thought it should, I hadn't tested it properly, hadn't put it through 20 to 30 trade sample. But when it wasn't working the way that I thought it was, I would sort of disregard that and move on to the next shiny thing. That's in the beginning, and that was just not the way to do it. Add to that, of course, I felt like I needed to know as much as I could, as soon as I could, and that actually led to an enormous feeling of overwhelm. Some of you can maybe relate to that. This overwhelming feeling that I've got to achieve this, I've got to learn as much as I can. As we said before, trying to create that certainty where there is none. And I think when you realize that we're dealing in an environment where there's no certainty. Now, my previous occupation, a lot of you will relate to this, accounting, engineering, medical background. Yes, there's uncertainty, but by doing our research, doing our study, we're eliminating as much of that as possible, whereas trading, we're not going to eliminate it. So rather than accept that I don't need to know what happens next, that quest for knowledge, or that information prison, was in fact an attempt to create that certainty. Now, trading will bring out the best, excuse me, and the worst in our emotions. There's an old saying that, in trading, it's about knowing thyself, and that when you master trading, you've actually mastered yourself. So it'll also have us questioning our ability. If we're undisciplined, angry, vengeful, or emotional in other areas of our lives, trading is just simply going to amplify that and exacerbate those emotions. So if you don't have a strategy to work with these emotions, they will just basically sabotage your trading. See, we're not hardwired trade effectively in the beginning. We have to rewire, create those new neural pathways to be able to trade effectively. We can never remove emotion from our trading, but we can train or rewire our mind in order to be able to operate in a manner that's more conducive to trading. It takes time, it takes dedication to develop and grow our mental muscle and develop these new habits, but it absolutely can be done. So really at this point in time, there was only really one way forward, and that was not only to learn and continue to learn about my psychological makeup, but also follow those plans, routines and strategies to protect myself from myself. So it all comes down to this for me: knowing and working with my strengths, and knowing and working with my weaknesses. Now, when you have weaknesses in your trading, it doesn't mean that you can simply, if possible, you can avoid the things where your weaknesses are prevalent, but there's some areas where you may not be able to, and you'll need to pick up your, lift your game to suit. So just expanding on this a little bit, having a background in engineering, my strengths are obviously in analysis, charts, statistics. So my preference, of course, is to having well thought out and well planned out ideas. Being very organised, detailed and structured, I rely heavily on processes and checklists to function just as an airline pilot would. The amount of knowledge that I've gained and the application of that knowledge and knowing what works and what doesn't work for me is what provides my edge. However, these traits also have their weaknesses. So what I tried to do over time is to dumb it down a little bit, because otherwise we get into that overthinking, over-analysing sort of phase, and keep things as simple as possible, try not to overthink things. Just because I put my time into the analysis of a particular chart or a setup, it doesn't mean that it's a sure thing. So it's important to be able to put my trader hat on. So take off my analyst hat, put my trader hat on and trade it accordingly. So these are just some examples. Now, I think it's important though also to add in some positives. I absolutely love what I do. I have a real passion for trading. I have a passion also to help others succeed. I'm my own boss. I've got no staff. Having looked after, dozens of staff members, to be able to only just look after myself now is incredibly rewarding. I don't need to be disciplined to trade. Some people find it hard. I work from home. I've got a fantastic setup here that I've built over time, and I absolutely love what I do. Barely any overhead. Can structure my day the way that I want. No more collar and tie. So t-shirt and shorts is generally the way to go. But also too, I continue to learn and be challenged every day. That's what I love. And I'm working towards my goals. This is what drives me forward. Would I do it again the way that I started? Or would I do it again? Absolutely. But I would do it in a different way. So I've learnt the mistakes. What that actually does is set me up to be able to impart those lessons and also those mistakes and help others in shortcutting their journey. So we might pause there again, Ian, I think, because the next part will be about my trading style. So is there any questions from you or the audience?
Just curious, how much time did you spend unknowingly learning areas which were not helpful too much to you? And like you've learned so much throughout this process, and I imagine anybody that could learn from you could save a lot of time in this journey. So how much time did you end up spending in total with going down all these rabbit holes?
Absolutely. So in terms of, the education side, probably 3 years, 3 and a bit years. So then it was a matter of applying that. So it took me probably another 18 months to 2 years. So really not including my part-time work, but once I went full-time, it took me then about 3 years to start being consistently profitable. So as I mentioned before, I could have shortcut that considerably had I had the right way to do it, but I didn't know. So it was a matter of figuring it out for myself by trial and error, producing the routines. Whereas if I had been given some of those routines, it's a matter of just following it. So I had to figure it out for myself as I'm trying to learn, as I've got this pressure to bring in income. So yes, it took about 3 years. And that's, now mind you too, that was, I'm not trying to put people off, but that was 3 years of probably 10, 12 hours a day.
Wow.
To give a bit of an example, the average swing trader, now this is roughly 10 to 12 hours a week. The average swing trader, it takes about 18 months to 3 years to be consistently profitable. The average scalper, very short time trader, it takes about 3 to 5 years. Now, some of you listening will probably know those that have moved into prop firms and things where there's training every day, there's psychological training, even that, with that level of quality education on a daily basis, that takes about 18 months of, equivalent of, full-time effort. Now that 18 months is probably, 40 hours a week. So it takes time. It will take time. And I think for anyone listening, it's important to know also where you are in that journey and not try to do everything as quick and as fast as you can, because going down a path, you'll find it's like peeling layers off an onion. You deal with one thing and then it exposes something else. So it's important to look at it and just deal with 2 or 3 things at a time. Once you work on those, then you'll find that something else creeps in. Now we're talking probably more psychological here. This is once you've proven up your edge. So it's important to give yourself time and realize that it will take time, and realize where you are in your journey. So yeah, so I hope that explains that, Ian.
Yeah, we have a question from Jens again. How
Yeah.
did you identify your strengths and weaknesses? Did you use a special psychological method, survey or diary, or ask friends and family?
Absolutely. Great question again, Jens. So how did I identify my strengths and weaknesses? The biggest thing is journaling. Okay. So as we said before, journaling before, journaling during the session, journaling after the session, and not just leave it till the end when you've forgotten about and you're not realizing the importance of it. If you're sitting there and you're about to take a setup and you can feel yourself from your mindfulness training, you can feel yourself starting to be compromised, then that's the best time to sit down and start to journal. Right, I'm feeling this way. Okay. So you pull yourself back, push yourself away from the desk, take your hand away from the mouse, start to journal what you're feeling, because now you're identifying those areas and those emotions that are creeping in. Because those emotions will stop you being objective. So once you experience that, now it's a matter of overlaying some strategies to collapse that emotion. And there's a way that I do that, but it all comes down to having what I call we have a trading plan. It's all about having a trading psychology plan. It doesn't need to be overarching or too extensive, but there's a plan to work with. It's no different to having if-then statements. So if the chart sets up like this, then I do this. If I feel a certain way, so in terms of psychology, if I feel a certain way, then I do this. And we're applying some strategies to start to collapse that emotion and bring us back into an objective state of mind, and bring ourselves back to into the right trading mindset. Because otherwise, once we're compromised, now we've lost that objectivity. Okay, so I'll show you my trading psychology plan if I've got it. Those of you that can see the screen, there's all my checklists. They're very important. There's a lot of them. So that's one thing that keeps you objective in your process. Okay, then there's my business plan. That's very important as well. And maybe down the track, I can maybe do some workshops on how to produce your own business plan. So there is my trading psychology plan. All right. Now, it doesn't need to be hugely overarching. It's 2 pages, okay? But I expand on all of those points. Then obviously in the background, I've got some, look, the classic trading in the zone principles. All right. So, you know, I go through that at the start of each session, and you know, there's a whole process with it, but it's not too much. Now, when people think, oh gosh, you know, and those that have traded for a while will know the importance, but trust me, it's not that much. It's about 10 minutes before you start, during the session, and then after the session. It shouldn't be any more than half to 3/4 of an hour a day. But trust me, that half to 3/4 of an hour a day is what's going to be the difference between being a break-even to losing trader to being consistently profitable. You can produce the best, you know, back testing curves that you like, which is important. You need to prove up your strategy, but then it comes down to now being able to apply it. So yeah, so I hope that helps. Jens?
Yeah, fantastic.
A little bit hard. It's a little bit hard. You can hear me struggling to kind of explain what usually takes, you know, half 3/4 hour workshop back into that. But yeah, so that's working with your psychology. Absolutely. Any other questions from the audience or Ian?
Anyone else? Okay, continuing on.
So just a little bit about my trading style. So, and I'll expand on how I've sort of arrived at these. So I have a big, strong bias to what the charts are telling me. I was taught that basically the charts reflect everything. The charts discount everything. You know, reflects the sentiment of those making buy and sell decisions. I look at, you know, charts as basically a graphic depiction of group psychology. Doesn't mean I disregard fundamental analysis, certainly not. In fact, the two dovetail very nicely into each other. That doesn't mean, of course, there won't be any shock events or surprises. It just means that I'm more interested in what's happening now, and that's where the chart tells me. So I have a very, very much big picture analysis. Drilling down is required. Even when I'm trading on 3-minute, 1-minute charts, you know, I will view the daily chart as the super high time frame. So, okay, so there's 2 styles that suit my personality and my strengths. So one of those is swing trading on equities using weekly and daily analysis charts. Then my entries are sought using daily and under, usually a 4-hour or a 60-minute. I have a preference for with trend, obviously. Time doesn't permit me to go into too much detail with this. Now, when I say swing trading, excuse me, swing trading equities, but also swing trading on commodities and currencies. Excuse me, I tried every, I obviously tried, excuse me a moment. So I tried, you know, most styles that I could. I tried equities, I tried futures, tried FX, tried a little bit of options. Also intraday short-term trading, I absolutely love. Now, this took me the most amount of time because it didn't suit my personality. So I had to sort of train accordingly. But scalping using high time frame market structure on a 30 or a 60-minute chart, and then the context and setups are identified on 5 or 3-minute charts, then my entries are fine-tuned on 1-minute charts. So this applies to equities on the open, of course, using catalyst or just using momentum, and mainly with large caps. So I'm here in Australia, so we don't have that vast basket of stocks like there is in the US. I've traded US stocks and I absolutely love that, but the time slot just doesn't suit. I just can't do it. And also scalping futures and Forex using these time frames. And sometimes I've even gone lower into tick charts, range charts, and 30-second charts to really fine-tune that entry. But the setup is identified on 5 or 3-minute. So, okay, with that, I think with that, folks, that concludes my presentation. So we can certainly open it up for questions, and perhaps I can just explain some of what I also do, not on the side, one of the other areas that I do in the mentoring. So would you like me to move on to that, Ian?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So the company that I have, which is basically just a website, is Integrity Trading. I try to trade with integrity and teach with integrity. I don't do this full time, of course, nowhere near that, but I absolutely love to teach. I love to see traders that have been trying to trade for 6 to 8 years, and then to bring them out of that and to get them profitable. That gives me a real boost. So if anyone is interested, that's the name of it. It's integritytrading.com.au, and there's an email there. So within that, I have structured mentoring where we work through that roadmap. I also do one-off mentoring where clients, students will come to me and say, look, I've got the strategy down pat. I just want those psychological routines. So one-off mentoring, and I do accountability where basically we just maybe meet once a month, once every sort of 3 months, go through the trading, go through their statistics, and just keep the trader accountable and online. Very intense, a little bit different to what's on offer there at CWT. But I do, with any of the structured mentoring or with any of these offerings, you would need to have a minimum of 18 months to 2 years experience. So why do I ask that? Simply because then I know that people have given trading a good go. They've made a lot of mistakes, and now I know that they're serious about it, and they realize that they need the importance of a mentor. So that's why I insist in that. I have had people that have been recommended that don't have a lot of experience, and I find once we go through the structured part of it, I find that then it's too hard for them, and they pull out, and they give up on it. But when students have done that 18 months to 2 years, I know they're serious. I know they realise the importance now of seeking out a mentor to help them in their journey. And of course, I do workshops through there as well. I am in the process of putting together some little bit more basic training to bring you up to that 2 years experience, but I haven't put it together yet. It's kind of secondary to my own trading. So that's what I do. So if it is of interest, or you would like to see the roadmap that I work through, I'm more than happy to have a look at that with people, and just discuss your journey, where you're at, and see if I can help you. So as I said before, I absolutely love that. It gives me a real sense of satisfaction. I have a real passion for it. So with that, we will open it back up to any questions from anybody.
Yeah, we have a question from Tessa.
Hi, Mark. So just asking about your early days of trading, how did you hold yourself accountable?
Okay,
when you were trading?
Of course. So basically, I was at that point in time, I held myself accountable to my partner at the time, my wife at the time, but also, accountable to being a good steward of my finances. That was the main overriding, being a good steward of my time, a good steward of my finances, but accountable to what my wife and I wanted to achieve. So, in the back of my mind was always, we've got goals, I guess my life goals, Tessa, was my overarching accountability area. But then I did also, was also accountable to my wife at the time, where I would explain, where I'm at, the struggles that I'm having. Not that she could help me necessarily with the trading or the psychology side, but just simply being able to be accountable to her for the finances, but where I'm at, helped me to bring everything out into the light, rather than I know with trading, when you've got smaller accounts, it's easy just to hide the losses away and just keep adding to it and just keep trying. Before you know it, you've dusted 20, 30,000 in a year. This may be part-time, and you've lost track of it. But very much journaling all my statistics. I had to show my trading to my accountant, so I did that every year. Even when I was going through the period where I wasn't earning a lot, I would present that to my accountant. So I had that financial record all along. So it was in my face all the time, I guess, Tessa. But my statistics, I'm very big on monthly statistics, quarterly, all of those reviews. So those review processes were incredibly important. Excuse me. Reviewing every trade, reviewing every 20 to 30 trade sample, seeing where I'm at on that curve. That was very important. Trying to set that, raise the bar all the time. That was sort of my inbuilt accountability, I guess.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm assuming if we have any questions for you, we can reach you inside the community. Is that the best way to reach you, or?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So okay. if anyone is after watching this, of course, on replay, if you do have any questions, reach out. More than happy to help you in your journey. So use the function within the platform there, more than happy to answer those. So
great. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for coming on Chat with Traders community presentation here, and we'll look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Thank you. No, it's been my pleasure. And as I said earlier, those that have listened, if you can take away something from it that helps you, one nugget that helps you in your journey, then I believe it's been worthwhile. So it's been my absolute pleasure. And I hope that helps you on your journey.
Great.
Thank you
Fantastic.
so much, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.